So Barbie, not an original idea, very much stolen. And if you go and look at a lot of these famous stolen ideas, like it's usually they're stolen at some early stage. This was not the case for Barbie. This was basically the biggest doll in Europe, the biggest doll in Germany, and Germany was toy maker HQ, you know? So the original German doll is called Bild Lilli. She starts as a newspaper comic for a tabloid called Bild Zeitung, which is basically the Daily Mail, the New York Post, think sort of conservative leaning tabloid with hyper sensational headlines. And she is introduced to the paper as kind of an accident when Axel Springer, the head of his eponymous company, Axel Springer, is laying out the paper for the first print issue. He sees that there's this blank, and so he calls in this cartoonist who draws for a different Springer publication and is like, "Give me a comic." And he draws this, sexy blonde, babe, and she becomes super popular. She gets fan mail. They make her basically the mascot avatar of the biggest tabloid in Germany. And then 3 years in, she's put on all this merchandise, Mickey Mouse style. She's on everything. She gets her own song. She gets perfume, champagne, and eventually they're like, okay, we'll make her this doll that we can, sell, and it'll be fun merch. The doll becomes even more popular. It becomes, something that one ad says from child to grandpa. So people of all ages are buying this product. Initially, it was mostly adults, actually, women and men, but especially men. But it grows and becomes, all ages, a toy for all ages, sold it across multiple different countries. And so Ruth encounters this doll, Ruth Handler, the founder of Mattel, and basically says, see if you can get this copied. And that becomes Barbie. The big question surrounding Barbie when they first launched her in 1959 is do we convince American parents to buy this doll with breasts? And at first, Ruth Handler gets a lot of pushback internally, people thinking, this is not going to sell. And that does seem to bear out when she launches the doll at Toy Fair in 1959. People don't really buy it. There had been another sort of adulty fashion doll that had come out the year before, and it didn't really do well. So a lot of the buyers were skeptical that this doll was going to be different. And so Ruth Handler brings in this guy, Ernest Dichter, who is one of my favorite personalities in the book. He's this Austrian market researcher who styles himself as kind of a Freudian protege. And he does have some real links to Freud. I mean, he studied with a bunch of his, proteges at university, and he was a former analyst. He had a practice on the same street as Freud in Vienna. But he decides he wants to have a more practical application of Freudian concepts, basically meaning we're going to get into the mind of the American consumer and find out what they really want. I think Ruth Handler was really canny about basically presenting Barbie such that you could project any kind of agenda or cultural resonance onto it. Because the main thing she wanted for this doll was, besides its, physical form and presenting a sort of adult woman rather than a baby doll, she wanted it to be blank. So unlike, say, Mickey Mouse or any of these characters who you come to know and who have certain personalities, Barbie is this really blank canvas. She has there's no lore. She has siblings in her family and friends, but there's not like a story there. And in the 60s, there briefly was a story. Mattel licensed Barbie to Random House, which published a series of Barbie books that was like, Barbie visits New York, Barbie solves a mystery, things of that nature. And the writers there try to develop some backstory. They give her, a hometown, and they give her parents' names, and she, has some sort of story. There's not a lot of consistency in there. It doesn't, like, they don't often come back to the same episodes and there's a lot of, inconsistencies. Sometimes she's from California, sometimes she's from Willows, Wisconsin. And by the mid 60s, after these writers have asked for a raise and are fired, uh, Mattel basically dispenses with the idea of, this backstory. And the genius of making her totally blank is that anytime any other doll comes out that could be a Barbie rival, they can basically put out a Barbie that is exactly like that doll. And that sort of, it's called flanking, but it's basically creating a barrier around your main product so that competitors can't get in. Um, and so an example that I get into in the book is in the 80s, Hasbro, maker of G.I. Joe, which has long tried to, elbow its way into the fashion doll market and take away some of Barbie's market share, comes up with this doll called Gem and the Holograms. And it's a girl group. Maybe you remember she had a TV show at some point. And the Gem is basically supposed to be a competitor to Barbie. But Mattel gets wind of this, and specifically this woman, Judy Shackelford, who I spoke with for the book, uh, who is then running marketing for Barbie. She gets word of this doll and finds out that it's going to be a rock star. And so she basically summons a team, a war team, and they go to the mat trying to create a Barbie rocker that they will put out before Gem, and undercut Gem's, entry into the fashion doll market. And they succeed in doing this. And it really, to understand how incredible it is that they pulled this doll together in 4 months. It was 4 months that they did this. It usually takes minimum 18 months for a doll to go from idea to market. So they are rallying the troops. They are pulling like tools used for other Barbie parts and everything. And they do undercut Gem's arrival. And obviously the Hasbro people are like, steam is coming out of their heads. And in the press, you can just hear the anger in their quotes. One VP is like, they obviously copied us. Like this is a copycat. But it doesn't really matter. It's Barbie. And so Gem, does a child today know what Gem is? Probably not. Barbie still in there, still at Kmart.